Now that we have everything ready, we can proceed to rendering our final image.
Let's go through some of the stuff that we need to tweak for the render here in the render properties tab, and then just move to tweaking the image a bit. So the thing is, with the rendering, if you check it out, you'll see like the first thing is the sampling. And that number here was the render samples. Well, let's try first rendering with 64 samples. Let's see what it does. 12 to render, and then you'll see with 64 samples, it's okay, but you can see a lot of noise in our render. And basically, if you increase the render samples, we'll have less noise because the computer will need to compute a lot of more samples and it would eliminate the noise. So if we go to 56 and then render 12 again, and then check it out, it takes longer because 64 samples is not a lot, but 256 is a little bit more. And of course, you can go super high. You can go with like 2,000 samples. You'll have less and less noise, but it's going to take longer, and it's not convenient, especially if you're working on something like an animation when you need to render each frame, and each frame takes super long. It's not going to be efficient for your project. Especially with something like this, for example, the first frame with 64 samples took us 16 seconds. With 256 samples, let's see how long it's going to take. $53 seconds. So you can see how long it takes with higher sample count. So the way I do it usually is go with a lower sample count, but the thing is, if it's a still image, I don't really care. I just go with lower because usually I do animations and stuff. But of course, and let's do it 128. But with 128, again, you'll have noise. So the way to eliminate noise is to have a denoiser in Blender, or maybe you can have an external denoiser outside, like a special software that removes noise, but I think it's just easy to do it in Blender. The way to do it is, if we go to the layer properties, you'll have this box unchecked, the denoising data. So if we check this box, and you see the page that we're at right now, the layout one, the workspace here, there's a few different ones, but like the one that we want to go to is compositing. And then we go to use nodes and check this box as well. Then you'll get those two nodes. And the thing is, I want to add a tab for the denoising data that I enabled here. If I hover my cursor here and press Shift A, then you'll find a lot of stuff with the search one here. Like you just click on the search and click denoise, type noise, and yep, we'll find the denoise one. Just click on it, put it here. It'll take the image and then connect it here. But the thing is, I want also to get the denoising data. So see the denoising normal, we can just connect this one to this one and this one to that one. And then if you render again and check the result, this is the one with 128 samples. And then just wait for it to finish. And once it finishes the whole thing, it's gonna run the denoising node, and then you'll see it gets cleaned, or removes the noise. That's one thing that we should do. With that done, we can go back to our layout again, and then you need to do like the render properties, like that one, the one I have. The samples is okay. Of course, we've been rendering with cycles the whole time. Since I have a good GPU, I'm rendering with the GPU, but of course you can render with CPU as well, and it renders with CPU by default, but you can change it if you want to. And also, when it comes to color management, I usually use Filmic with medium high contrast. And of course, the most important thing is this, like the output properties here. If you want to tweak the resolution, because of course after you finish the whole illustration, it looks nice and everything, you want it, let's say you want to render like a 4K render, you can tweak the render resolution here, the X and Y, and of course if you want to multiply that, or maybe you're working on it and you don't want to go full on 4K, so you can go 50% of something. Or maybe like I'm rendering 1600 by 1200 right now, but let's say I'm done and I want to double that. So yeah, 200% of that. So it's just nice to have that option. And of course, you check here the output if you want to have it like in a certain format. I think the default is PNG, so you just go with PNG. But if you want to go with JPEG or something, it's there. And then, of course, after finishing everything, you press F12, and then it renders, removes all the noise, and then you have your final render. I'll just wait for it. And of course, if you want to go with a more vertical render, not like this 4:3 thing, you can just change it here, and it would change it in the scene as well. So yeah, if you decide that you want to go, for example, maybe 1600 here, yeah, you can go do something like this and it would work. Maybe you need to rework the camera a bit so it fits all the objects, but yeah, you get the idea. And then you have this nice render, and then we can move to tweaking the image in Photoshop. With the image opened in Photoshop, you can make some more tweaks. Usually what I do is, of course, I try to make the image look good in Blender with all the colors, the lighting, everything. But some stuff like you cannot avoid, especially with exposure. Sometimes you have the photos a little bit dim or maybe a little bit too bright if you're using some other color management thing other than the filmic one. It's just good to tweak it in Photoshop, especially if it's a still image. If it's an animation, of course, it's gonna be a little bit more tricky, but with something like that, it's super simple. With the image we have here, we can just go to the adjustments here and tweak the RGB curves a little bit. And with the white arrow here, you can just increase the brightness a little bit, something like that. Usually with my renders, I prefer to have some colors desaturated. But with this illustration, I think if we increase the saturation a little bit, it would be better. So we can go to the hue and saturation one and up the saturation a little bit. And of course, you can make so many more tweaks if you want to. You can add, I don't know, some gradient if you want to add some type of volumetric lighting, maybe paint some highlights on the monkey. If you have a graphic tablet, you can just change whatever you want. Maybe if there's one color and you don't want to re-render everything because of one material, you can just change it in Photoshop. But for now, like with our illustration, I think this is quite good. You don't have to do much besides that. Maybe if you want to do something, you can maybe paint some glow on the stars or something. But yeah, for this, I think it looks good.
With this done, in the next lesson, we're going to share the artwork on social media.